Glad you could make it this morning. We began this last week by talking about qualifications for being an office bearer in the church. And, that's the kind of thing you could go on and talk about just about forever. This morning we're going to try and get a little more practical. And like I said, in worship, both of these sessions should be online as well. If you're not familiar with how to find that, if you're not familiar with how to find it, just get on YouTube and search Brookfield Christian Reformed Church. And I think we have a channel, John, is that what it's called? So yeah, you get in there, you can find our worship services, adult ed sessions, all that kind of stuff. So let me begin with a word of prayer, and I'm going to turn it over to Jason. Lord God, thank you for this time that you have given us to explore, Lord, your provision for the church and provision through the leaders that you provide. And Lord, this is not a small, trite kind of thing. This is a weighty matter. Those who lead your church, who guard your church, who shepherd your church, these are all big things, especially as we are, as a church, your light in the world. And so, Lord, we desire to shine brightly, and we desire to remain shining. And so we depend on you to continue to provide leadership for your church. And we ask that this little session may somehow contribute to your goal. Bless us, bless each person here. Thank you for their interest in this topic, and we know that you are present with us, so thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Well, my one job this morning, as I understand it, is to just do a brief kind of organizational flyover. That's my one part, and to talk a little bit about leadership and authority and how those two things fit together. So, I have heard it said, and I agree with this statement, that the Reformation wasn't really about justification by faith alone. The Reformation was really about authority, right? That's what was being debated, was authority. And the question was, where does authority lie? Where is the locus of authority? Is it in the scriptures, in the Bible, or is it in the church, in the organization, right? And Protestants decided that when push came to shove, the locus of authority in the church lies with the Bible, not with the organization, right? And so then after the Reformation, all Protestant churches now need to do this thing where we figure out where the authority, how authority works in our organization. And all Protestant churches want to say, of course, the scriptures are our authority. That is correct. That is what we say here as well. But we also have an organization, right? And so then we have to figure out organizationally how is authority going to work, since we're not buying in to the model that was in place before the Reformation, right? We're not adopting the model of authority that starts with the Pope and runs down. Then we have to figure it out for ourselves. And it turns out there are options for Protestant churches for how authority is going to work in the church, right? There's an option that's a more congregationalist option, where authority is basically everyone who is a professing member has authority, decision-making authority in the church. And in congregational churches, they end up voting on pretty much everything because all the decisions are all made all together, right? So it's kind of a grassroots authority, lies with everybody, and everyone has one vote, and elders don't get extra votes, and pastors don't get extra votes, and it's just we're all in this together. That's the congregational model. We're not that, right? Another model, and there's not just one other, but another model is kind of a top-down model. It kind of looks like the business world a little bit, where the pastor is kind of in charge. He functions like a CEO. Most decisions run through him. And then organizationally, it kind of flows down from that. So in that model, the senior pastor, authority-wise, ends up functioning like a little pope, like a mini pope just for the church, though, right? That's that model. We're not that either. So in the CRC, we have opted for a model that's somewhere in between those two. We're not congregationalists, but sometimes we have congregational votes, right? And we're not the senior pastor is in charge. We're not that. So what is the model The model is where our council has authority to make for decision making within the congregation, right? And our council consists of all of our elders and deacons. And the pastors are part of council as well. So when decisions come up that need to be made related to this local church, it's our council, that team, that is exercising those decisions together, right? So I just wanted to explain that to get you oriented within the Protestant world, within these different models. We're in the CRC kind of this middle model where it's a group of people, but not everyone, but a selected group of people, the elders and deacons who are the council that have the authority for making decisions within the church. Now when you break that down to deacons and elders, and this, I'll just briefly say this, any kind of generalization like this is always kind of sort of wrong, but it's at least helpful. So deacons in general are tasked with caring for, making sure that the physical needs are met. Within the congregation, physical needs are met. If there are needs in the community, we're identifying those and reaching out. And even globally, deacons are helping us meet physical needs. In general, that's a big generalization. Whereas the elders are more focused on the spiritual needs of the church, making sure that everybody's spiritual needs are cared for, that they're being visited, that they're being encouraged, that they're connected, things like that. If there's a church discipline situation, that's elders. So big generalization, but deacons are looking after caring for physical needs within the church and community. Elders are looking after the spiritual needs within the church and reaching out to the community. That's kind of how authority works within the CRC. That's my whole part this morning. And I'm not taking questions. Okay, questions.
Who takes care of the church building?
Yeah, so I'll let someone who's been here longer than 7 months answer that. In my last church, that fell under an admin team that was under the deacons, but every church does that differently. And I honestly don't know the answer to that. But I bet Peter does.
No one. Yeah, who takes care of the church building? So we do have what's called our admin committee, admin council, but yes, they are the group that looks at snow plowing and who's going to do it and how much they're going to be paid and all that kind of thing. So that's a committee underneath the council. So it's actually the council that is, you put the deacons and the elders together, and then that forms the council. And the council very much oversees the business matters of the church, staff, hiring, how much they get paid, do they have insurance, all of those kinds of questions, nominations for elder and deacon. We can go on, but that's the purview of the council as a whole. And the council is made up, yes, of elders and deacons. Okay? Jason didn't mention too, but we are a denomination. And so we have sort of different levels above us as well, or I would say levels that keep us in check and keep us on track.
I had that in my notes. I skipped it.
There you go.
I had one job and I failed. So that's right. I talked about how authority works within our local church, but we are a part of the denomination, and so there is a.
It's going to be easy to make up. You're here in the
I'll get there. So there are levels of support and accountability within our denomination. It's one of the beautiful things about being part of a bigger thing than just one local church. And so we'll work our way up. So from our council, then if we go one level up from our local churches, classis, and that is all the CRC churches within Wisconsin gather together twice a year. Every church sends a pastor and an elder and a deacon to come together and a lot of that meeting is encouragement and support just for the local churches, but there's also some decision-making things and some bringing decisions to bear on local churches. So what happens at classis impacts what happens at our local church, but it's one step removed, right? Our council is making the more specific decisions for our church, but classis is a network of support. And then if you go one level up from that, we have a yearly meeting for all of our classes to send delegates to Synod. That happens once a year, and Synod makes decisions that impact our whole denomination. And so that's how Authority works in the CRC. Okay.
And if you want to read more or study more about that, we do have in the Christian Reformed Church what's called our church order. And it's a smaller pamphlet kind of book, but it's thick in terms of what's contained in it. And really, an office bearer in the church ought to try to get fairly familiar with that. And so, that's how things are intended to run in the church, and that's what our classis and our denomination then sort of hold us accountable to. All right, so thank you for leading off that way, Jason. And from here, we'd like to get into a little bit more how things tend to work in our congregation fairly practically. And so I'm just going to talk about a few of those things, and then I'm going to ask up here a former elder and former deacon and have them talk a little bit about their experience and the kinds of things that they were involved with. But there is a bit of a cost to being an elder and deacon, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. For one, there is time involved, and I often get the question, well, about how much time does it take to be an elder and a deacon? So I actually tried to sit down and put that on paper at one time, and I don't work directly with the deacons like I do with the elders, but I think it's a fairly similar equation. And what I came up with is it's probably about 10 hours a month that you're going to put in extra time, and that doesn't include travel, but 10 hours a month that's included in the work of being a deacon and elder. And these guys can tell me if that's different in a little while. But let me just share with you some of the things that we do time-wise. Okay, so every month there's an elder and deacon meeting. And those can run anywhere 2.5 hours. Okay? There is also a council meeting where the two are combined. That's probably another 2.5 hours. So right there you've got 4 to 5 hours. So right now our elders meet the first Monday of the month. Our council meets the second Monday of the month. The deacons meet, I believe, the fourth Wednesday of the month, just to be different. So those are that's where it all starts. That's sort of the baseline for time you're going to be putting in if God calls you to one of these offices. Then besides that, you've got ad hoc committees that come up. So there are committees that are going to come up periodically throughout your 3-year term, and that's what we serve, a 3-year term. It's probably not the best phrase. It sounds like it's some kind of punishment. You got a 3-year term as elder. It's really not that, right? But then there are roles within the diaconate. Let's say we need a treasurer. That person puts in a lot of time. There are probably former treasurers here, and the kind of time you're putting in. It's like a second job. Then there are missions. So the deacons head up our missions team. So we have a mission advocacy committee that really reports directly to the deacons, and they have a liaison. Okay, you might wind up as the missions liaison. They have a secretary, someone who keeps notes and keeps things organized. You have a chair of the deacons, a vice chair. You have somebody or two people actually who sit on the executive committee. You have, I think, 4 who are involved with pastoral care teams, and then a couple of others who are involved with life group ministry. And then you have on top of that classis meetings. Classis meets twice a year. You're also eligible to attend synod, which takes place once a year right now. And so let's say you volunteer or you're elected to go to synod, right? That's another week at least of your life. You're not compensated for that really. You do get a little money for travel, but basically you're taking a week's vacation out of your life and you're heading off to some great place in the world like Grand Rapids, Michigan, or Sioux Center, Iowa, or something like that. Elders are very similar. So we have the regular meetings, but then we also have new member visits or interviews that take place. And, that varies from year to year how many new members are actually coming into the church, but those meetings generally take place on a Sunday morning after worship, and it's a couple of elders for another hour. You've got the same thing, caregiver and life giver meetings. So 4 elders are overseeing caregiving and life groups, pastoral care in that pastoral care sense. You've got corresponding with inactive members, which is, I know, not one of our favorite things to do, but it's one of the things that God calls us to do. There are people who are active in the church for a while, and all of a sudden they're inactive, and somebody needs to follow up with them and try and find out what's going on in their lives. Where are they? Maybe it's just a simple thing like, okay, we moved to another city and we didn't let you know. We're still attending church. We're great, right, in our faith. And then again, it could be a totally different story. And sometimes, people ghost you and they don't let you know where they are. And you wouldn't think this would happen within the family of God, but those things do happen, and they usually end up on the elder plates. You have pastoral care, direct kind of things. You have things like elders bringing communion to those who are unable to come to church. And so there's just a lot of this involved. Organizationally, the elders and deacons also oversee our streams of ministry. So one stream might be youth education, another stream might be adult education, like what we're doing today. We always have either an elder or a deacon who's sort of overseeing that group of ministries. And somebody should have overseen it better, because I had copies on the copier of all that, and I think I left them sit there. But we can grab those at a later point. So other things, deacons are doing a covenant plan meeting right now. Those are led by the deacons. They prepare that presentation. It's not like a redo every year. They try to be creative and try to hold your attention, try to communicate the message of what the covenant plan is. It's the largest part of our budget, so that's a big thing. And it's just another thing that falls on their plates. There's a lot of correspondence involved. You get a lot of emails from me or from the chair of the council, and a lot of work just has to happen during the week. Not everybody is flexible enough to answer those all day long, but that's usually when the things are happening. Some people have to sit down at night and start responding to all the things that they missed during the day. So it's not a lot. It's not an easy job. It takes a lot of energy, and then there's also just a certain weight that comes with being a member of the council. We talked about the qualifications last week. Well, those are high qualifications, and in just about every sense, right? Council members are called to be examples in the congregation, and that's not an easy thing. And council members are also asked to sort of be among the congregation, so to be present. And I think Jason mentioned this last week. Presence is a really big thing. We ask our council members to be present as much as possible. And that's not easy for everyone, but it's basically, the idea, we want you to be here for worship as often as you can be, right? So could you consider taking vacation, Monday to Saturday instead of Saturday to Saturday, that kind of thing? Why? Well, because one of the main descriptions of our office bearers is being a shepherd. And to be a shepherd, you need to be out among the sheep. And that's where a lot of pastoral care takes place. That's where we kind of find out, hey, this is going on in this person's life. This is how we can pray for them. This is how we might need to encourage them. If we're not here, if we're not present, then we can't do that sort of thing. So there is just that weight of being an example, being among the people. There is a workload that comes with things, and then there's the just the weight of watching over the bride of Christ, and I'll say something about that just at the end. I think there are many blessings that come with being an office bearer as well. And I think I'm just going to start our little interview, and we'll try and hear first person if any of this is true and what it actually looks like in real life. I'll ask you guys up here. So I've got Ben Van Wielden, who is a former elder in the church, and Sandy Boersma, who is a former deacon in the church, and they have both been office bearers not just once, but a few times, and so they're, I'll just say, experienced at the job. If you could just take turns how you want to answer these. If you want to introduce yourselves, why don't you start with that?
I'm Sandy Boersma. I've been a deacon 3 times. I see several deacons in here, former deacons that I served with. I don't know if I'm a little nerdy, but I think being a deacon is really fun, with a lot of work involved. But I really enjoyed each time I was able to serve as a deacon.
All right, thanks, Sandy.
Good morning. I'm Ben Van Wielden, and I've been very fortunate to have been a deacon twice, I think, and an elder twice. So I've done a little bit of both. I think I'm a little more the elder side this morning, but I will agree with Peter that if you're the church treasurer, that 10 hours is more like 10 hours a week and not 10 hours a month. But I think that's one of the exceptional roles. So anyway, I'm happy to answer questions this morning.
All right, so let me get you started by just asking, what was your favorite part of being a deacon or elder? And along with that, what might have surprised you about the role?
Okay, so we got these questions yesterday afternoon, so we're all prepped. My favorite part probably is just working with people and getting to know people better, whether that were, fellow elders and deacons, or not surprisingly, getting to know pastors better, whether it was Pastor John years ago or Peter or now Jason and Young Kwang. So getting to know people on a different level of depth is a great part of the job. And really, in some cases, you'll find yourself partnering in ministry with someone or helping someone, and you get to know the congregational members as well. As an elder, new member visits, welcoming people into the church and establishing kind of a name and a face with someone who's joining the church, and then being able to follow through with them over the next year or two is a great joy. I drew a blank on the surprise part.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. Sandy's got a great surprise.
I'll start with surprise. I think I was surprised at how humbling it is to be an office bearer, because you're working with people who are really gifted, but you're reminded that you're serving God's church, right? It's not Sandy's church and Sandy's agenda. That would only be cool for me, and it would ruin the church, right? So you're just one person in a long line of people who have been asked to help shepherd a church. And when you get off council, when you're on, you know what's happening, right? When you get off, you're done, right? You don't know what's happening anymore. You're like everyone else. And I think that's a good thing, right? Because you know that it's not your church, it's God's church, right? So, I would echo Ben. The thing I really enjoyed and was also the hardest was working with people, right? Deacons tend to see people when they're in financial crises or really need help. And it's hard, right? It's really hard to work with people, to know what to say to them sometimes, to know how to help them. But I think that's also the most rewarding, when you can walk along with someone and encourage and support them.
And could you just expand on that a little bit? Is helping people financially just giving them money?
Oftentimes, but that sometimes is a start, but what often happens is we would, sit down with people, and they have to be really vulnerable with you. It's not easy to come and say, I think especially in this church, to come and say, hey, I need help. I've either been mismanaging my finances or something, catastrophic has happened to me. And so you have to sit down with them and just sort of work through what are the causes? How did you get here? How can we help you change, right? I mean, rarely, but sometimes that has. The first time I was a deacon, we basically took someone's checkbook, right? And we wrote the checks, right, to help them get back on track. That's a huge responsibility you have for someone's finances. Normally, it's lately we haven't had maybe such extreme challenges, but people are in a hard and hurting spot, and you're called to help.
Yeah.
You can't just say, here's a check and walk away.
Yeah. For both of you, for each of you, was I fairly accurate in the time commitments, and what perhaps did I miss?
This is my personal opinion. Of course, being on council, being an elder or deacon is a lot of work and a lot of time, right? And you have to be willing to put that in. I don't know if I hope you have experienced this, that maybe at some point you were challenged to give financially and you stressed yourself giving, and you found that God blessed that. I think I'd say for me it works the same way with your time. I mean, each time I was a deacon, I thought, well, my life is pretty busy right now, right? How am I going to fit this time in? And frankly, after the first deacon and council meeting, when you get the list of everything you have to do, I felt a sense of panic, right? This will never get done. But I think God blesses your time when you offer it to Him, and you get things done, and you find that you have the time to do it. And I can't explain how that happens, but God honors that. And so we've just heard that some people are really concerned about the time commitment, and I'm not making light of that, but don't let that necessarily stop you from serving, right? Because God opens your time for you somehow in ways that we heard this morning, God is mysterious, right?
That's very true.
I'm going to agree with Sandy. Sometimes you think, how could I possibly make time for all that? At the same time, you just sort of do it. You prioritize it. You go to meetings. Sometimes you miss Monday Night Football, which is something we really ought to think about. No, just kidding. Although when the Packers are playing and it's a council meeting, you can look around. There are people watching the score. So
Same for when the Bears are playing?
that is true. Oddly enough, there's too many Bears fans on our council. Something we should think more about as we do nominations. On a more serious note, though, I would tend to agree with Peter that, on average, maybe it's 8, 10, 12 hours, but I think there are seasons to that. I definitely remember maybe going to an elders meeting and digging out my notes and realizing, oh, here's the list of things that I was committed to doing between the last meeting and this meeting, and there's the list, and I didn't do hardly any of it, And, that can really hit home. On the other hand, you might find yourself going to a meeting and going, I did a ton of stuff this time, and God uses you either way. I think that, I don't know if this is right in the vein of this question, but I'll just say it. Meetings are good, but the work that you find yourself doing beyond the meetings tends to be the more valuable work, and the work that sticks with you more, and the work maybe that affects people more. Now, there are exceptions to that. Sometimes council or elders or deacons work on something that I would call strategic and really, really important, and a lot of prayer goes into it, and we're making tough decisions for the benefit of this congregation and even more broadly. And that's very valuable too. But there's a lot of just tactical day-to-day things that you need to meet about that have to happen. And sometimes just listening to, someone talk about, various things gets a little bit tedious. But all in all, the time spent outside the meetings is probably the most valuable and probably the most rewarding and sometimes the toughest. Okay.
Thank you. All right, so Sandy mentioned that, there are some former office bearers or present office bearers here now, but there are also a lot of people who maybe haven't served before. If you were speaking to them, what would you say prepared you most to be an elder or a deacon?
Boy, that's actually a tough one. I think that you can think you're prepared, but there will be some things that come up that you're not very prepared for. But I think just being a member of a church and watching how things work does give you some sense of what it would be like to be a deacon or an elder. And certainly getting active in the church in other ways really does jumpstart you towards being more prepared for that. Whether, jump in and be a Sunday school teacher, jump in and work with the youth group, be a life group leader. There's a lot of ways you can get active in church that would probably give you a lot more insight on what it would look like to be an elder or a deacon. Okay. Again, there are a few things you're going to run into where you kind of go, oh, I didn't know that I was going to have to do that, or I didn't know we were going to talk about this or that. But I think just being active in the church somehow, and ideally in more than one way, would prepare you.
Just one thing to add, I think it's really helpful to talk to a lot of different people and work with and know a lot of different people, right? Because when you are an office bearer, you have to minister to rich, poor, young, old, everyone, right? And if you only talk to your own friends and only if that's your view of the church, you're missing a whole bunch of people.
Okay, yeah, good point. Let's just stay on that line a minute. There are probably many people here too who may have not come from a Reformed background. What difference does that make? How important is it that you know sort of a Reformed framework for theology? Do you need to know Berkhoff? And maybe if you do need some of that stuff, where do you find it? Where would you go?
Can a deacon answer that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You don't need to be a theology expert, right? But everything we do, the decisions we make are based on our Reformed understanding of Scripture and what God calls us to do. So there are basic things you have to know, or you should know, or you can learn, right? Like, we believe God is sovereign. We believe that God has given us everything we have, and so an act of worship is to give back to God, right? And we believe we give back with our finances, our time, our gifts. We use our gifts to serve. That forms a framework for decisions we make, right? Or what we ask the congregation to do. And I think if you've been around the church, you will have picked up on those things, but a basic level of theological understanding, I think, is necessary.
Okay.
Well, this is easy to do, but I'm going to agree with Sandy first off. And yes, I think you should know exactly who Berkhoff is. That's just a personal opinion. I see one of my, I'm actually doing a class on Reformed theology right now, and we talk about Berkhoff once in a while.
Wednesday nights.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Reformed theology, and I love that we're a Reformed church, and to me there's a lot of depth to what that means. I don't know exactly how much background would be required to be an elder or deacon, but I do think, like Sandy said, there are certain things we do and decisions we make that really do rest a lot on those Reformed bedrock principles, and you might be a little bit almost confused if you don't have some background in that. Now, there's a lot of ways to get that. You can, talk to a pastor about it. You could go to life, your life group might study it. You can pick up books somewhere. The church library's got a ton of stuff. You can go to classes. In general, I love that we're a Reformed church, and I hope we continue to sort of grow our depth of that and the discipleship around what it means to be Reformed.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
So it's not necessary, but it's probably pretty nice.
I would agree. You can always start with the Heidelberg Catechism,
There you
right?
go.
Okay, Sandy, for deacons in particular, one of your callings is to promote good stewardship, stimulate healthy, stewardship within the congregation. How does a deacon go about doing that?
That's something we talk about a lot as deacons, right? And an obvious thing to do is to give people lots of opportunity to support missionaries or give or, give money to things, right? I think one thing we talked about the last time I was a deacon was it's easy, it seems like, for our church to write checks. And we can send in money and we can raise a lot of money pretty easily. Is that all of stewardship? And we said, no, we have to try to teach people to use their gifts and to use their time also. And so it's sort of an ongoing question, right? We try to provide volunteer opportunities for people. We try to have them aware of causes, aware of organizations that people in the congregation are involved with, they could maybe get involved with, but that's like a sort of a perennial question.
It is. Ben, maybe from the elder side, one of the biblical descriptions of an elder is to be a shepherd. Do you find that's true when you're serving? In what ways? Tell us a little bit about, I guess, that and maybe how you see yourself when you're an elder.
So I think that is true, and I think the analogy is apt. Caring for the people in the church, especially more spiritually, is the heart of being an elder. And I love what Peter said earlier about just being present. Being at church. Sometimes I would find myself, having had a busy week at work, not wanting to talk to people that much. But when you're an elder, you feel like you've got to kind of talk to people after church, especially people that you don't know and might not know you and who you are. I think that I love our making disciples kind of mantra or priority or mission here at BCRC. And I think that finding ways to have people grow closer and closer to Jesus is very, very important and something that elders are called to do. I think the elders work hard at pastoral care. I think the elders love life groups and want as many people as possible to be in working life groups. And so encouraging those things, encouraging great pastoral care, encouraging life groups that are really working is really critical if you're an elder. And then sometimes just making tough visits or reaching out to people. Those are all important things, and those are the challenges and those are the blessings.
Thank you. Sandy, one last thing. As a deacon, is the work of a deacon all about money?
From what we present at a congregational meeting, you would say yes, right? Because we show the budgets, we talk about money. But if you read the form for the installation of elders and deacons, deacons are called to show mercy, right? And I think it's important to have a balance on the diaconate. And I'm not a finance person at all, right? I teach fourth grade. We don't get into finance, but you need a balance, right? Because we absolutely have to manage the resources of the church well, and there are people who do that. But we also have to care for the congregation and show mercy for the congregation, right? That doesn't get a lot of headlines, right? We're not going to say, well, we helped the Verhulst family this week, right? I mean, you don't hear that work, but we have to care for and support and encourage the congregation, and so you need both. So, I mean, frankly, I've had a lot of women say to me, I don't know anything about finances, so I can't be a deacon, and that's just not true. That's not true, because we need both. Otherwise, we get out of balance.
We're sort of running out of time, and there's a lot more things I'd like to ask. But maybe just to wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you. We all love Jesus, and that's a huge part of this job and what qualifies you for this job. Do you also need to love the church?
Yes.
If that's all you got, that's all I need.
You have to. You're serving people, right? You're loving people. You're showing Christ's mercy to them. If you don't like them, if you have your own agenda of what you want to have done, you should rethink being an office bearer, right? It's Christ's church. Christ loved the church and died for us, so we have to show that love to our fellow believers.
Yes, you do need to love the church, and it's really the only way you'll be able to be obedient to Christ and the calling to be an office bearer. It has to start with loving the church. You know, it's going to involve some really joyful things. It's going to involve some tough things, and if you don't love something, how hard will you work to make it better, or how hard will you work to address a really significant need if you don't love it? So yeah, I think you have to start out with a love for Christ's church if you want to be an office bearer. I think that's pretty fundamental.
All right, thank you, Ben.
Yep.
Let's thank these guys a moment for being up here. And I just want to close with John Calvin's thoughts on that last question. And he views very much the church as the bride of Christ. And so Christ is the bridegroom. And then he looks at office bearers in the church as what he calls friends of the groom. You might say, the best man and the whole group. And this is what he says in his commentary on the book of John. He says, "Whoever shall have such affections that, laying aside all regard to himself, he shall extol Christ and be satisfied with seeing Christ honored." So as the best man, or as one of the groomsmen, Christ is everything. That's what you're there for, is to honor Christ. And then he goes on, he shall extol Christ and be satisfied with seeing Christ honored, will be faithful and successful in ruling the church. But whoever shall swerve from that end in the slightest degree will be a base adulterer and will do nothing else than corrupt the spouse of Christ. So in Calvin's own way, what he's saying is the bride doesn't belong to the best man. And I think Sandy put that well in saying, if you have your own agenda, you shouldn't be an office bearer, because this is a job where you are serving the bride and doing all that you can do to present the bride as a pure, spotless lamb to the bridegroom. That's something that's so important for all of us as office bearers to remember. Anyway, thank you for your time and attention. We'll go on with this conversation. As we said, we hope to have a more formal class at some point on leadership training, and I hope you'll look for that. But continue to be in prayer for your church. All right, thanks everyone.